4 women who restored a forgotten ranch until they found out who really owned it. The coffee mug still had lipstick on the rim, red stain on white porcelain, sitting on the porch railing like a ghost refusing to leave. Celeste Morrison stared at it through the kitchen window, dish towel frozen in her hands. 3 months of scrubbing every surface, replacing every broken board, painting every wall. But somehow she'd missed this one small detail that proved they weren't the first people to call this place home. Iris Whitmore appeared beside her, morning coffee steaming in her hands. "You've been staring at that thing for 10 minutes. Someone sat here recently," Celeste whispered. "Someone who wore lipstick and drank coffee and had no idea 4 strangers would renovate her life." The ranch had been listed as tax-delinquent property. Eddie Marsh, the real estate agent, barely glanced at paperwork when they signed the lease-to-own contract. 4 women pooling savings to resurrect something left to die. $12,000 invested. 16-hour workdays. New shingles, fresh paint, thriving vegetable garden, converted art studio. Delphine Carter's accounting spreadsheets tracked every expense. Nova Chen's artistic eye designed every improvement. Iris organized schedules with teacher precision. Celeste held them together with natural leadership earned in hospital corridors making life-or-death decisions. But none of them had noticed the lipstick stain that meant someone else had been living here, planning here, loving here. From the living room, Nova's voice cut through morning calm. "Certified mail just arrived. Return address says Morrison County Legal Services." The envelope carried official weight. Expensive paper, the kind that delivers life-changing news. Delphine opened it with steady accountant hands, but her face went pale reading the letterhead. Iris set down her coffee cup too hard. Celeste felt the dish towel slip from numb fingers. "Ladies," Delphine's voice shook. "This ranch was never abandoned." The letter explained everything they'd gotten wrong. Silas Thornfield hadn't walked away. He'd been granted extended tax deferment due to family medical emergency. His wife Margaret had been fighting cancer in Houston for 8 months. The hardship program Eddie Marsh had ignored was legitimate, documented, legal. Their lease-to-own contract wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. The letterhead showed a phone number and deadline that made Nova's hands tremble. 72 hours to contact the estate attorney. 72 hours to arrange departure or discuss compensation for improvements made to property they didn't own. Celeste picked up the lipstick-stained mug from the porch railing. Margaret. The name was printed in faded ink on the bottom. This wasn't just someone's home they'd invaded. This was a dying woman's sanctuary they'd unknowingly restored while she fought for her life in a hospital room. Outside, gravel crunched under approaching tires. Through the window, dust clouds announced a visitor none of them expected. The timing was too perfect, too terrible. 72 hours had just become right now. The pickup truck belonged to Morrison County Feed and Supply. Not Silas Thornfield returning to reclaim his home, but close enough to make 4 hearts stop beating. The driver wore coveralls and carried a clipboard, approaching their porch with the casual familiarity of someone who'd made this delivery run for years. "Afternoon, ladies. I've got Silas's monthly order, but I have to say this place looks incredible. When did he start the renovations?" Celeste answered before anyone else could speak. "We're taking care of the property while he's away." The lie came easily, but Iris flinched like she'd been slapped. Her teacher's ethics couldn't stomach dishonesty, even to buy time. "Actually, we need to be honest about something important." Delphine cut her off with accountant precision. "What we need is to understand our legal position before saying anything that could be used against us later." Nova clutched Margaret's coffee mug against her chest. "What if we just called the number on the letter? Explained what happened?" "Explained what?" Delphine's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who'd seen financial disasters destroy lives. "That we got swindled by a con artist and accidentally invested $12,000 in someone else's property." "We didn't know," Iris whispered. "We thought we were saving something abandoned." "Intention doesn't matter in property law," Delphine snapped. "Possession does. Improvement does. Documentation does. And right now, we have none of those things on our side." The delivery driver stood awkwardly on their porch, clearly sensing tension he didn't understand. "Ladies, I can come back another time if this isn't a good moment." Celeste made a decision that would change everything. "Actually, we'd like to ask you about Silas Thornfield. How long have you known him?" 15 years, maybe more. Good man. Been delivering feed here monthly until his wife got sick." The driver's expression softened. "Real tragedy about Margaret." 43 years married, and cancer took her 2 weeks ago. The words hit Nova like a physical blow. Margaret was dead. The woman who'd chosen the sage green paint, who'd planned the rose garden, who'd left her lipstick on a coffee mug that would outlive her by months. "When did you last see Silas?" Celeste asked. "At the funeral. Broke my heart watching that man. He said he was coming home to the ranch soon. Needed to resume normal life, whatever that means for someone whose normal just got buried." Iris sank into the rocking chair they'd bought at an estate sale. Her teaching career was over, her reputation destroyed, and now the one place that had given her peace was built on deception. Nova walked to the garden she'd designed from scratch. 3 months of work, 3 months of hope, growing in soil that belonged to a grieving widower. Delphine pulled out her phone with the lawyer's number displayed. 72 hours means we call now or lose any chance of negotiating. The delivery driver climbed back into his truck, but rolled down his window before leaving. "Ladies, I don't know what's going on here, but that man has been carrying grief for months. Finding his home restored instead of empty might be the first good thing that's happened to him since February." As dust settled from his departure, Delphine's finger hovered over the call button. In the distance, another vehicle approached, moving faster than a delivery truck, carrying news that would end their 72-hour deadline before it began. The second vehicle wasn't Silas Thornfield either. A sheriff's deputy pulled into their driveway with the unhurried efficiency of someone making routine rounds. Deputy Maria Santos stepped out carrying a folder and wearing the expression of someone delivering unwelcome but necessary news. "Morning, ladies. I'm looking for whoever signed paperwork with Eddie Marsh regarding this property." Delphine's face went white. "That would be us. All 4 of us. Figured as much. Eddie's been busy this month. You're the third group of folks who got caught up in his creative interpretations of property law." Deputy Santos opened her folder, revealing documents that made Celeste's stomach drop. "Turns out he's been running the same scheme on distressed properties across 2 counties. Iris found her voice first. "Scheme? Eddie targets properties where owners hit medical emergencies, family crises, anything that creates temporary absence. He lists them as abandoned, forges documentation suggesting tax default, then collects fees from folks looking for fresh starts." Deputy Santos looked around at their improvements with obvious sympathy. "Problem is, the properties aren't actually available." Nova clutched Margaret's coffee mug tighter. "So we're not the only ones?" "Not even close. Eddie collected lease payments from a young family on the Henderson farm while the owner was deployed overseas. Took deposits from elderly couple on the Martinez ranch while the family was settling an estate." Deputy Santos shook her head. "County's finally building a case, but it doesn't help folks who already got swindled." Delphine's accounting mind latched onto practical details. "What happens to our investments? The improvements we made? That depends on property owners. Some have been reasonable about compensation. Others," Deputy Santos trailed off diplomatically. "Let's just say grief and financial loss don't always bring out the best in people." Celeste noticed something that chilled her blood. On the deputy's paperwork, handwritten notes in the margin listed other victims, other properties, other amounts stolen. $12,000 here, $8,000 there, $15,000 from the young military family. Eddie Marsh had been systematic, calculating, predatory. "How long has Eddie been running this operation?" Celeste asked. 2 years that we can prove. Could be longer." Deputy Santos closed the folder. "I have to ask, when did you last speak with him?" 3 months ago when we signed the lease," Nova answered. "He's been avoiding phone calls since word got out about our investigation. If he contacts you again, call immediately." Deputy Santos handed Celeste a business card. "And ladies, I'm sorry this happened to you. What you've done with this place is remarkable." From inside the house, Delphine's phone began ringing with the harsh electronic tone reserved for unknown numbers. They all heard it, but nobody moved. Phone calls had become harbingers of disaster. Deputy Santos climbed back into her patrol car. "That might be the estate attorney. Silas Thornfield called this morning asking for an expedited resolution. Said he was driving home today and wanted everything settled before he arrived." The phone continued ringing as dust clouds disappeared down their gravel drive. 72 hours had just become 72 minutes, and Eddie Marsh's trail of destruction was about to collide with one grieving man's journey home. The phone stopped ringing, just as Celeste reached it, leaving behind voicemail notification that blinked like a warning light. She pressed play with trembling fingers, and a gravelly voice filled their living room with words that changed everything. "This is James Burton. estate attorney for Silas Thornfield. My client is en route to the property and expects to arrive by 4 o'clock this afternoon. Any parties currently occupying the premises need to contact this office immediately to arrange orderly transition and discuss compensation for improvements. Nova checked the kitchen clock with growing panic. 2:30. 90 minutes to figure out how to explain 3 months of their lives to a man who just buried his wife. Iris wandered through the house they'd transformed, touching walls they'd painted, running fingers along windowsills they'd repaired. In the master bedroom, she stopped at the dresser they'd cleaned but never opened. We should know who Margaret was before we meet him, Delphine protested with accountant logic. That's invasion of privacy. We've been living in her home for 3 months, Iris replied quietly. Privacy got complicated when Eddie Marsh put us here. The top drawer held reading glasses, prescription bottles, a hospital bracelet with Margaret Thornfield's name, and dates that told the story of 8 months fighting a losing battle. But underneath, Nova found something that made her gasp. A spiral notebook labeled Garden Plans, Spring 2024 in careful handwriting. Page after page of sketches, plant lists, seasonal color schemes. The herb spiral Nova had built stone by stone was drawn in Margaret's notebook with identical dimensions. The tomato trellises, the butterfly garden, the placement of every flowering bush. Margaret had planned it all. She designed everything we built, Nova whispered, flipping through pages that felt like prophecy made real. Look at this. She even chose the same sage green paint for the living room. Celeste studied the notebook with growing amazement. It's like she knew exactly what this place could become. From outside, gravel crunched under tires moving faster than delivery trucks or patrol cars. Through the window, they could see dust clouds approaching with the urgency of someone coming home after months of absence. Delphine clutched the legal paperwork against her chest. What do we say to him? The truth, Celeste answered, but her voice carried no confidence. Iris gathered Margaret's coffee mug, the garden notebook, and the hospital bracelet. We tell him we brought his wife's dreams back to life. The engine sound grew louder, closer, until it stopped right outside the front door they'd painted Margaret's favorite shade of blue. Through the window, they could see a gray-haired man sitting motionless in the driver's seat, staring at a home that looked nothing like the broken place he'd left behind. Nova moved toward the front door, but froze when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. A second vehicle was pulling into the driveway behind Silas Thornfield's truck. The real estate license plate and familiar sedan belonged to Eddie Marsh, arriving at the worst possible moment to face the consequences of his lies. 67-year-old Silas Thornfield was about to meet the con artist who'd sold his home while his wife was dying, and 4 women caught in the middle had nowhere left to run. Silas Thornfield sat in his truck for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel, while his eyes took in a home that looked nothing like the broken place he'd left behind. Fresh paint gleamed on every surface. The garden Margaret had sketched in hospital beds now bloomed in perfect rows. Even the front porch where she'd planned to hang wind chimes held hanging baskets overflowing with flowers she'd never lived to plant. Behind him, Eddie Marsh's sedan sat idling with the engine running. Through his rearview mirror, Silas could see the real estate agent fumbling with paperwork, probably calculating how to spin this disaster into something that wouldn't land him in jail. The front door opened, and 4 women stepped onto the porch that should have been empty. They stood in a line like defendants waiting for judgment, each face carrying different expressions of guilt, hope, and terror. The tallest one held something in her hands that made Silas's breath catch. Margaret's coffee mug, the one with the chip on the handle that she'd refused to throw away because it held memories of their first apartment. Silas climbed down from his truck on legs that felt decades older than his 67 years. Behind him, Eddie's car door slammed with the sound of someone preparing to run damage control. Mr. Thornfield, Eddie called out with false cheerfulness. I was just coming to check on the property maintenance situation. These ladies have been doing excellent caretaking work while you were away. Silas turned to face the man who'd sold his home while his wife was dying. Eddie Marsh looked exactly like what he was, a predator in an expensive suit, sweating through a smile that had probably convinced dozens of victims. Caretaking? Silas's voice carried 43 years of marriage and 2 weeks of grief. Is that what you call selling my house to strangers? The woman holding Margaret's mug stepped forward. Mr. Thornfield, my name is Celeste Morrison. We need to tell you something about Eddie Marsh that you're not going to want to hear. Eddie interrupted quickly. Now hold on. There's been a misunderstanding about the paperwork. There's been a crime. Iris Whitmore cut him off with the firm voice of someone who'd spent years managing difficult teenagers. Deputy Santos was here this morning explaining how you've been running this scam across 2 counties. A younger woman with paint under her fingernails clutched a spiral notebook against her chest. Mr. Thornfield, before Eddie says anything else, you need to see what we found in your wife's dresser. Silas felt something shift in his chest. These women weren't trying to hide from him or make excuses. They were trying to protect him from the man who'd victimized them all. Eddie sensed the mood changing and took a step toward his car. Listen, Silas, the legal situation is complicated, but we can work out a reasonable arrangement that benefits everyone. Don't move, Silas said quietly. We're going to settle this right here, right now, with everyone's cards on the table. The woman with the notebook opened it to a page that made Silas's knees buckle. Margaret's handwriting filled the margins around a garden design that matched exactly what now bloomed in their front yard. Silas Thornfield stared at his wife's handwriting with tears he hadn't shed since the funeral. Page after page of garden plans, color schemes, seasonal layouts. Everything Margaret had dreamed during those long hospital nights now bloomed in perfect reality around him. The herb spiral she'd sketched matched exactly what grew beside the kitchen window. Even the placement of the butterfly bushes followed her precise measurements. She planned all of this? His voice cracked like old leather. Nova Chen stepped closer, still clutching the notebook. Every detail. We found this after we'd already built everything. It's like she was guiding us somehow. Eddie Marsh cleared his throat with calculated sympathy. Silas, this is obviously very emotional, but we need to discuss the practical legal matters. Shut up, Silas said without looking away from Margaret's drawings. You sold my wife's dreams to strangers while she was dying. I want to hear their story, not yours. Celeste spoke with nurse-steady calm. We each paid $3,000 to Eddie for what he called an abandoned property. We've invested another $12,000 in materials and 3 months of 16-hour workdays. We didn't know about your wife, about the tax deferment, about any of it. We thought we were saving something that nobody wanted, Iris added, her teacher's honesty making Eddie wince. Delphine pulled out her accounting ledger with receipts and spreadsheets documenting every expense. Mr. Thornfield, we have complete records of everything we've invested. We're not trying to steal from you. We got stolen from too. Eddie took another step toward his car. The important thing is that everyone can benefit from this situation. The property value has increased significantly due to the improvements. Stop moving, Silas ordered. You're not leaving until I understand how this happened. Deputy Santos's business card lay on the porch railing where Celeste had left it. Eddie's eyes fixed on it with growing panic. His scheme was unraveling in real time and everyone could see him calculating escape routes. Ladies, Silas said, still studying Margaret's notebook, show me everything you've done. For the next 20 minutes, 4 women gave a grieving widower a tour of his wife's resurrected dreams. The vegetable garden produced exactly what Margaret had planned to can for winter. The flower beds bloomed in the color progression she'd mapped for year-round beauty. Even the converted art studio in the barn matched sketches she'd made for a pottery workshop she'd never lived to build. With each discovery, Eddie Marsh grew more agitated. His con depended on quick exits and confused victims, not detailed tours that revealed the scope of his theft. Silas, we really should involve attorneys at this point, Eddie interrupted, as they examined the restored chicken coop. The legal complexities require professional. The only attorney getting involved is the prosecutor, Silas replied. You stole from these women, and you tried to steal from me. Eddie's facade finally cracked. I provided a service. These ladies got a beautiful home. You got free improvements. Everybody wins. Everybody except my wife, who died thinking her home was falling apart while you were selling it to strangers. The words hung in the evening air like a judgment. Eddie Marsh was trapped between a grieving widower and 4 women he'd swindled, with nowhere left to run except straight into the arms of county law enforcement. But Silas wasn't finished. He had one more question that would determine everyone's fate. Silas Thornfield stood in the center of the garden his wife had planned but never lived to plant, surrounded by 4 women who'd unknowingly brought her final dreams to life. The question that would determine everyone's future wasn't complicated, but the answer would change all their lives forever. Ladies, I need to know something, and I want complete honesty. Silas closed Margaret's notebook and looked each woman in the eye. If I offered to buy you out fairly for your investments and improvements, would you take the money and leave? The silence stretched long enough for Eddie Marsh to shift nervously beside his car. This wasn't the confrontation he'd expected. Criminals like Eddie thrived on chaos and emotion, not measured decisions made by grieving men who'd found unexpected clarity. Celeste answered first, her nurse's instincts recognizing a man making peace with impossible choices. Mr. Thornfield, 3 months ago, we were 4 strangers running from different kinds of failure. This place gave us more than shelter. It gave us family. I lost my teaching career to false accusations, Iris added quietly. Coming here wasn't about finding a house. It was about finding dignity again. Delphine clutched her accounting ledger. I made one mistake that cost me everything I'd built in 40 years. Starting over at 52 seemed impossible until we found this place. Nova held Margaret's notebook against her chest. My family wanted me to abandon art for something practical. Here, I found out what I was meant to create. Silas nodded slowly. And if I asked you to stay? To help an old man figure out how to live in a place that's too full of memories to face alone? Eddie Marsh couldn't stay silent any longer. Silas, you're making emotional decisions at a vulnerable time. The legal complications alone. The legal complications end right now. Silas pulled out his phone and dialed Deputy Santos's number.
Maria, this is Silas Thornfield. Eddie Marsh is at my property trying to leave the scene. You might want to send a car. Eddie's face went white. You can't prove I did anything illegal. The contracts were legitimate. The contracts were fraud, Delphine interrupted,
opening her ledger to pages of documentation. I've been an accountant for 25 years. I know criminal activity when I see receipts for it. Silas continued his phone call. Yes, I'll keep him here until you arrive. And Maria? Bring paperwork for filing a restraining order. This man is banned from my property permanently. Eddie made a desperate calculation and sprinted toward his car. He managed 3 steps before Silas called out in the voice of a man who'd spent decades managing livestock in difficult situations. Stop running, Eddie. You're only making this worse. Eddie's hand was on his car door when Deputy Santos's patrol car appeared at the end of the driveway, lights flashing. The timing was perfect, the trap complete. Eddie Marsh's scheme had finally caught up with him on a ranch he should never have touched. As the deputy approached, Silas turned back to the 4 women who'd restored his wife's dreams. Ladies, I have a proposition that might sound crazy to everyone except Margaret. She always said this ranch was too big for 2 people and too lonely for one. Celeste felt her heart stop. What kind of proposition? The kind that turns 4 strangers into a family and makes sure this place never sits empty again. Silas smiled for the first time since Margaret's funeral. But first, let's watch Eddie Marsh get exactly what he deserves. Eddie Marsh sat in the back of Deputy Santos's patrol car wearing handcuffs and the expression of a man whose luck had finally run out. Through the window, he watched his victim celebrate justice while his real estate license and freedom disappeared forever. The county had enough evidence to prosecute him for fraud, theft, and elder abuse across multiple cases. His scheme was over. His victims would get restitution, and Eddie would spend the next few years explaining his crimes to a judge. Silas Thornfield stood on the porch where his wife had planned to hang wind chimes, surrounded by 4 women who'd accidentally become the family he'd thought he'd lost forever. In his hands, he held the legal documents that would change all their lives. Margaret and I bought this ranch 43 years ago, with big dreams and small bank accounts, he began. We planned to fill it with children, grandchildren, laughter, life. Cancer took the children we never had, and 2 weeks ago it took Margaret too. Celeste felt tears she hadn't expected, watching a man transform grief into hope. But Margaret was right about one thing. This place is too big for one person and too lonely for someone my age to manage alone. Silas smiled, the first genuine expression of joy any of them had seen from him. So here's what I'm proposing. You 4 ladies become legal co-owners of this ranch. Equal partners with me in a working property that needs your energy, your skills, and your dreams. Nova gasped. Co-owners? The lawyer drew up papers this afternoon. You keep everything you've invested, plus equity stakes that grow with the ranch's success. Silas handed Delphine the contracts. Your accounting skills can manage our finances. Iris can handle the educational programs we'll offer for local kids. Nova can develop the art therapy workshops Margaret always wanted to host. And Celeste can coordinate the medical respite services for rural families dealing with health crises. Iris found her voice first. You're giving us a home and a purpose. I'm giving myself a family, Silas corrected. And I'm giving Margaret's dreams a chance to live through people who understand their value. 6 months later, The Thornfield Ranch operated as a community center, working farm and sanctuary for people needing second chances. Delphine's financial management had turned the property profitable. Iris taught children from 3 counties in the converted barn classroom. Nova's art studio hosted healing workshops for families facing medical crises. Celeste coordinated support services that helped other families avoid the isolation Margaret and Silas had endured during her illness. Eddie Marsh served 18 months in county jail and paid full restitution to his victims. His real estate license was permanently revoked. Silas Thornfield found that sharing Margaret's memory with 4 women who honored it daily was better than carrying grief alone. The wind chimes Margaret had planned for the front porch finally hung where she dreamed they would, singing softly in the Texas breeze, while a family she'd never met lived the life she'd designed. 4 women who'd moved into an abandoned ranch discovered that sometimes the best homes are built not on ownership, but on love, justice, and the courage to transform loss into hope. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.